talked quite intellectually about research, and I'm wondering whether we could have any kind of examples from, whether you might have a couple of examples where research has informed your practice, kind of bringing it down to that level.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are lots.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start, that's okay, because I can think of a very, very obvious one. When I was an early counsellor, so I was just coming out of my training, I experienced the suicide of one of my clients, somebody I've been working with for a long time, that I had a very good relationship with, and her suicide was really very, very unexpected. And it was professionally and personally profoundly traumatising for me. It's hard to really encapsulate just how traumatising that experience is. I kind of lost everything, that confidence in myself, let alone the loss of that individual, the relationship that we had. I had a very supportive team. I went into personal therapy, and that was very helpful to me. I had a very good supervisor, and that was helpful to me, and they all played their part. Just pure by chance, I didn't see myself as a researcher at that point at all. I would have been one of those people who said, research is really nothing to do with what I do. I'm a therapist. And just by chance, I can't even remember how it happened, I came across this study, a research study that was published in the British Journal of Guidance and Counselling by Barbara Richards. And her paper was looking at the experience of counsellors following the suicide of a client. And it was a breathtaking moment of change for me, because I would never ever have considered looking to research. Right. And actually reading that paper.
And as you say that, there's a real sense there for me of you connecting into a wider group, because that was going to be about.
Absolutely. It's like these people.
So you weren't alone with that anymore.
These participants in this study were saying all the things that I was feeling. And suddenly it changed, and I thought, that helped me more than all the other stuff. The other stuff was helpful, but actually it was that was the change point for me. And it just made me realise, I can remember, it's almost like in a moment, I can remember realising just how profound research can be, because nothing else was speaking to me in the way that particular paper really did at that time.
That's really, that's it's quite an example, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can all imagine, for those of you who haven't had experience this, we can imagine how devastating that must be.
Absolutely, yeah.
And yet, and also I can see how, finding something really helpful and a kind of sharing, I don't know, for me it's like a sharing. Other people were experiencing the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's I can see how that really, you engaged with research.
Yeah. No, it did several things very quickly. It helped the process of beginning to heal my trauma at a personal and professional level. It brought research into my thinking. It made me want to read more, and in this particular field, made me realise that there was very little written in research for counsellors who work with people who are suicidal. And that really irritated me. It's like people weren't looking at this, so it made me want to go and do a course.
And it's really, really important.
Where I could do that research. So it was at that point I became I see myself as a practitioner researcher, not an academic researcher, as a practitioner researcher. And so I want to learn about my practice, not just reflecting on what I do with my clients or for myself, but I want to do it. I'm interested in doing it more systematically, in asking more people and more practitioners and more clients about their experience. So, because I was thinking, if nobody else is writing about this, then, well, I will.
Right.
I'll write about it. I wasn't academic. I walked out of my degree because I thought it was tedious. I went and worked as a care assistant. I don't come from an academic background. But in that moment and at that point, something changed, and I thought, well, I'm going to do this. And I have done.
Research gave you something really, really valuable,
Massive.
really kind of special.
Yeah, yeah. And there's been all sorts of different examples along the way, but that's a really pivotal one for me.
It's like the original in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks. Thank you for sharing
That's
that.
fine.
All eyes on.
Yes,
All eyes on you, Hadyn.
I don't think my example is as profound as that at one level. At another, it gave me a sort of a eureka moment. I, as I've indicated, I've been a practitioner for many, many years, 25 years when I first started, and my first training was in a classic Rogerian person-centered model. I subsequently trained in psychodynamic psychotherapy and also in cognitive behavioural, different trainings at different times. And for quite a while, I found myself unsure how to integrate. So I tended to compartmentalise these different ways of working, and wasn't particularly creative in harmonising the different perspectives that these trainings offered. Until I came across the classic Petrashka and De Clementa model of the cycle of change. And in its later iterations and the descriptions of it to enable me to begin to integrate that within that cycle and that process, the variety of skills that were needed to be effective to move someone from contemplation, pre-contemplation, all the way through to change and autonomy, required that very significant blending of skills that could be used often within one session, calling upon a variety of skills from the cognitive behavioural, the humanistic, the psychoanalytic. And when the research underpinned it gave me a framework to start integrating, and it became very powerful and liberated me and removed some of the anxiety that I had about not quite knowing how to integrate these different ways of being. Maybe a better practitioner as a consequence.
Right. So it was like became a kind of core, almost a core process.
Yes.
Around which we were able to weave these different, quite different theoretical approaches,
Yes.
and the associated skills and techniques and whatever.
Yes.
So that again, it's like Andrew's example is very emotionally dramatic in a way. I can imagine it being incredibly devastating. But yours is also quite profound, really, because it's the way that you brought together all of these very different ways of thinking about the human being and how human beings change around a research-informed or research-based way of understanding human change.
Yes.
And what's taking it beyond Hadyn, my own experience, what I enjoy in supervising counsellors who are coming into research at the first time is that when they're researching something that matters to them, that's important to them, their growth in confidence and competence is fantastic to see. But it's the energy in which they can engage with their research process, and the fact that in that process you can see research becoming embedded into who they are as practitioners. You know, so kind of what I would be wanting to say to people who are suspicious of research is for sure be suspicious and be questioning and be critical of it, but also don't be frightened of it. You know, see it as something that you can find your way into.
And as you say that, again, I'm thinking that because I go to quite a few and have done over the past few years research conferences, and I've got lots of papers, most of which I haven't read that much on my little flash drives and things. They can be quite almost impenetrable. Some research presentations, some papers, and that can be. It's almost like if that's your first impression, it's not a good one. And so coming back to the way that the BACP, in a whole range of ways, is looking to recognises that there's a big gap between that world of the researcher and a practitioner, and making a bridge between those two worlds, enabling those findings to be easily engaged with, so that hopefully some people at least will have some kind of real gain some real value in the way that you two have described from some research findings.
in a sense, in terms of BACP, that's what counselling and psychotherapy research, that the journal was about. When John McLeod launched that journal, I think it was back in 2001, the point of the journal was about doing just that. It was about bridging research and practice. It was about trying to make research as accessible as possible. Would I say that every single paper that's been in counselling and psychotherapy research since is accessible and has achieved that? Well, no, evidently that hasn't been the case. Would I say a lot of them has? Then yes, they have. It's also been the journal, and other journals do this too, but talking about BACP's role here, it's also been the journal, and I edited that journal for 6 years, so I know. It was the first time that many practitioners had ever published their work. And so it actively encourages new researchers to write. It actively encourages people to write, whether it be from a qualitative or quantitative or a mixed method approach, to write in a way that is accessible. It asks all authors, all researchers to write very clearly what are the implications for practice.
So it's almost like you're describing to me a kind of counselling practitioner-centred journal, or counselling-centred journal.
Yes, I mean that's what it tries to do. It also has an international audience. It attracts international authors. So it is also an opportunity to look at practice and research from different perspectives and different cultural perspectives. But yeah, I mean its remit is to try and bridge research and practice. That's what it's aimed to do, and I think that's what. The work of the research team at BACP, I think that's what they try and do in everything. They're looking for best possible practice, supporting best possible practice through the development of good quality research.
Yeah, and certainly I've found the journal very valuable. At the same time, though, maybe there's something about, for some people who are coming to it, and we talked earlier about, where it's the whole language is off-putting or whatever. It's something about first impressions, really. It's about helping people to engage in their first impressions in a very easy way. And using video, which we discussed earlier, is one possible way. But there's if we can, it's all about engaging, really, isn't it? If you engage with this, then you can get something of value from it. Mm-hmm. And the two examples you gave of research findings, being meaningful to you and you integrating them were examples of real engagement.
Do you know, we can stand at the edge of the pool and we can debate long and hard as to whether the water is going to be cold or warm, or whether it's going to be deep or shallow, or whether there's going to be currents, or what it'll be like once we're in there, and will we be able to swim? And we can have that discussion, and ultimately there's something about slowly lowering yourself into the water and seeing what it's like. And going back to CPR, counselling and psychotherapy research, as an introduction to it, I would suggest go to the website. There's a website where Hadyn talked about before, where the editor and the editorial team translate the research findings into everyday newsy type language deliberately to try and help people have the confidence to then take the next steps and the next steps. But I would say don't be put off if you read a paper that you don't like or can't understand. I've read many textbooks that I've not made any sense of, and I've tended to throw them away. And so I'll go to a different textbook that I can make sense of, or I'll push myself to try and understand it. But there's good writing and bad writing.
There are, aren't there?
Yeah.
I've certainly read some pretty impenetrable texts.
Absolutely.
Outside of the research, but inside the different theoretical orientation.
Yeah. There are good writers and not so good writers, and it's about finding your way. But don't stand criticising the colour of the water. Get in the pool and try it out.
Yeah.
There's something about reading the abstract. First of all, does this speak to me? Does it actually? Does it seem to have a relevance to my practice? Will it make a difference? That might then indicate, okay, I'm now going to have a look at the conclusions. What does that? And then think, actually, that's really exciting. How on earth do they get to that point? That then encourages me then to look at the process that's gone through to enable me to think, well, I'm not quite sure they've got sufficient there to enable them to draw that conclusion. Now, I'm perfectly at liberty to do that. I can make my own assessment then, whether I have my own confidence. And with the CPR, of course, it is subject to peer review, so a lot of that rigour has already done to enable us to have confidence in the conclusions that are drawn. However, I still have liberty as an independent practitioner with autonomy to decide whether that research actually genuinely speaks to me and I have confidence in it, as to how I might then want to explore it further and maybe develop some of the ideas within my own practice. So it becomes a very creative and an engaged process. BACP is very keen, though, to try, as I said earlier, to be the bridge, to find some way of translating from that formulaic approach, which has its reasons, but to enable someone to feel inspired to think this is something I want to know more about. We're also looking at, when we tweet news feeds when there's something interesting in research. So we try to find ways to start engaging people. Think, okay, there's something there, let's go onto the website and have a little look at that. There's a move in due course to move everything onto the web, so to move away from hard copy. So everything is predominantly on the web, easily researched, good digests, great archives, be able to search around topics and areas of interest. So you can build up sort of composite picture around an area that's of interest to you, that's being researched, and to see how it influences your practice.
Of course, as a BACP member, you have access to every single paper in CPR from issue 1. That's hundreds of papers.
Yeah.
So, if you're wanting to take those first steps into research and try it out, it doesn't have to cost you any more, just go and access, because that's one of the difficulties with some of the research papers. You can get the abstract, but unless you have an affiliation with the university,
pay you $35,
it costs a lot of money. So, there's a resource of hundreds of papers there across a whole spectrum of practice that you can just kind of dip your toe in the water with.
Especially because it's $35 per paper.
It's a lot of money.
It is.
Yeah.
One last thing which we haven't mentioned is the conference. You've got an annual conference dedicated to research. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, it's a golden moment on the BACP annual calendar. It's something we're hugely proud of. The research conference started in 1994, I think, developed by John MacLeod and Sue Wheeler, both very eminent professors in the field. And they gifted this research conference framework to BACP in 1999. And we're into, it's 22 years or so, something like that, the research. And it's grown and grown. It now attracts delegates from all over the world. It's through the conference we have presented, I think, over the years about 1,000 peer-reviewed papers. It's a great place in which, as a student and as a seasoned practitioner, to meet, to network, to learn from different areas, things that you might not have wanted to explore before. It's a very dynamic sort of 2-day event, and very energised. And it's something we're very proud of.
I've been to a few of them over the last few years, and I've always found them very inspiring, really.
Good.
From a personal note, I think I've been to pretty much every one from the second or third conference. When you're starting as a practitioner researcher, so when I go back to when I started as a practitioner researcher, and you're stepping into doing your own research for the first time, you have the good support of your supervisor and maybe peers, but it can feel scary and it can feel lonely. There were a few moments where I had wobbles when I was first doing my own research. I had great supervision, but I have to say it was the research conference and networking with peers, with people who felt similarly to me. The research conference isn't all expert researchers with a capital R. There's a lot of people there, perhaps a majority, who are practitioners, maybe presenting for the first time. And I found it immensely supportive and affirming. And I probably would go as far as saying that it helped me have the confidence to continue with my research process. It's in my own professional development, it's been incredibly important.
And in fact, I'm just thinking that I just remembered that we wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't come to the last conference and we'd had the conversation both about the CPCAB Counselling Research Award, which will be linked to the conference. So it will be findings at the conference that we look to disseminate through video, to get out into the world through video. But also, it was there that we talked about doing this filming. So it's apart from all the papers, some of which are really interesting and some are less interesting, depending on your particular interests.
Yeah.
I've always found it a really wonderful place to meet other fellow counsellors and psychotherapists. It's been great, actually.
Yes, that's it. And that's one of the additional benefits of the research conference. It's drawing people together. It creates a community which has learning.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, for me, I would have to say that the networking is equally
Absolutely
valuable. There's some fabulous conversations I've had at BACP conference and at some other ones as well.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's the at the lunch and the breaks and after and then the evening and the meal, whatever. It's a combination. It's a 2-for-1 really, if not more than that.
Yes. I would want to encourage all those new into the profession, those who are students, to experience the conference, to get a sense of it, because at that point you begin to feel the community you're looking to join.
And I think you have some student bursaries. I don't know actually.
Yes, there are some student bursaries.
Just for those people who haven't, who to help with the access to it.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
And I think next year, from what I remember, it's just been I recently got an email through. It's going to be in Brighton, in May.
Yes. Sorry, a slight blank moment, but yes, it's Brighton.
In May, I think.
Yes.
It's possibly the third weekend in May, something like
Yes,
that.
that's right.
And that's 2016.
Indeed. And we do our best to move the research conference across the country. So
yeah, no, I remember going to one in Liverpool, and I went to one in Edinburgh as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, no, that's good. That's good, and I should certainly be going there.
Good.
Next year. It's already in my
Great.
diary.
That's what I'd like to hear.
So, well, I know you've both travelled a long way. 4.5 hours driving is a long way. So thank you very much for both of you for coming here and to sharing about research and its importance for the counselling profession.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you
very
for the
much.
invitation.